It is election day, finally, and I hope you vote, vote, vote. 158 million Americans voted in our 2020 presidential election. 78 million Americans have already voted in this election, including yours truly. But I want you to get up and get out and vote. The weather map is bad in the middle of the country. It's raining and some thunderstorms are expected, so better to vote early than late. The folks up in Montana, where Tim Sheehy needs to win that United States Senate seat, they got to deal with some snow. So you don't have a bad day compared to other people. Get up and vote. Now, I want to emphasize, and I did in my Fox News column this morning, that you can register and vote on the same day, even if you've never registered before, if you have identification, proof of ID, and residence in the state where you're living. And that includes Virginia, which is possibly a swing state, and New Hampshire, which is possibly a swing state. North Carolina is same-day registration and voting. Michigan and Wisconsin have long allowed for same-day registration and voting. New Mexico, Nevada, Montana. There is a map, in fact, at the National Association of State Legislatures, nsl.org, of the 31 states that allow people who've never voted in their life. If you're an American citizen and you're 18, you can vote today in 31 states. Not Pennsylvania, not Ohio, not Indiana. There are a lot of places like, I believe Maryland allows same-day registration voting, and yes, indeed, it does. So here are the Senate seats we're watching. By the way, headline, Dixville Notch went 3-3 for Donald Trump, 3 for Kamala Harris. 4 years ago, there were only 5 residents in Dixville Notch, New Hampshire, which always votes at midnight. They voted 5-0 for Joe Biden in a harbinger of what was going to come. But a 3-3 split is what we've got. This could be a one-vote election. If it is, Joe Rogan decided it for Donald Trump by voting for Donald Trump. He endorsed Donald Trump. He'll vote for Donald Trump. Kamala Harris has no qualifications to be president. She is a danger to the republic because she is simply lacking in the minimum skill set to defend our men and women who are in harm's way today. That's my takeaway for you. We've got to protect people in the military. Donald Trump knows how to bring peace to the Middle East, how to stand up the military again, how to rebuild it, restore it, restock it, resupply it. And the vice president does not. Minimum skill set also involves being able to sit down and answer questions with everyone any day on any subject. She won't take any questions and hasn't. She did one serious interview and came late and left early with Brett Baer because she doesn't know enough to be president. It's dangerous if she wins. I've got nothing against her. She might be a perfectly nice person. I've never met her, but I lived in California until 2016. She came out of the Democrat-run Bay Area left-wing machine that includes Berkeley, San Francisco, and the Silicon Valley. She is a hard left Bay Area Democratic, I would say, left-wing radical. And that's what you'll get. And it will be the system that backs her if she wins. Donald Trump is a known, if mercurial, personality who has done the job before and will bring in 3,000 people with him. That's my pitch. You're not just electing a president, you're electing the 3,000 people they bring with them. I cannot imagine wanting 4 more years of the chaos that we've had at the border, the absolute funk the economy is in. Please get out and vote. While you're at it, Joe Rogan is an interesting thing. Joe Rogan's main demographic, young men turn out. If you're 18 and older, vote. I've missed one election since 1974 when I could first vote, and that's because I was called to be an observer, a captain of an election observation team in Yahoo City, Mississippi in 1986 on the night before, and I hadn't registered an absentee. I expected to be in Virginia in 1986 when I was running the Office of Personnel Management's General Counsel's office, and I had to go to Mississippi, so I didn't get to vote. It took in those days a long time to get an absentee ballot. But I regret not voting in 1986, and I haven't missed it. I voted 2 weeks ago to make sure anything came up. Grandchild needed taken care of. I was ill. Dwayne showed up for work, and I was stunned. Anything showed up at all, I would be ready to vote. So I want you to get out and vote. Let's run down the Senate scorecard already. I've told you why you should vote for Donald Trump. We are going to win West Virginia. Governor Justice will be Senator-elect Justice by the end of the night. I think Tim Sheehy's going to walk away in Montana. People know John Tester is a lefty, and they are tired of being represented by a guy who shows up every 6 years and pretends to be a Montana representative. He's not. Captured by the Beltway. Tim Sheehy, SEAL, warrior, businessman, wonderful guy. We want Larry Hogan to win in Maryland. I love Larry. He's a Ravens fan, but he's still been a great governor. He deserves your vote, Marylanders. We want Hung Kao to win in Virginia. It's a reach. It's a reach, but it's possible if you get out and vote. And remember, you don't have to have registered before in Virginia. You can show up with identification, proof of residency. If someone tells you to go away, don't go away. Demand a provisional ballot. Fill it out carefully, legibly. File your ballot. If someone tells you to go home tonight and you're in line before voting deadline, you stay in line, stay in line, stay in line. Do not listen to the exit polls. Dwayne reminded me before the show began. We were doing this show live in 2004. The exit polls were dirty. They were depressing voter turnout. Do not even look for them. Pay no attention to them. They cannot get it right. They don't know how to do it. If you're in New Mexico, Nella Domenici deserves your vote. Now, those are all reaches. Larry Hogan, Hung Kao, Nella Domenici, Larry more closely than the other two, but they could win in a 1980-style sweep. 1980-style sweep, no one saw it coming. And the sudden shift. I mean, Megyn Kelly showed up with Donald Trump last night. I'll play you that clip today. Megyn Kelly showed up with Donald Trump. Yesterday, Jimmy Brown's daughter and the son of Roberto Clemente showed up in Pittsburgh for Donald Trump. This could be an amazing day. There are a lot of great Senate candidates. Dave McCormick deserves your vote in Pennsylvania. Please drive through the rain in Pittsburgh and vote for Dave McCormick. West Point, successful businessman, son of the Yinzer land, great guy. Bernie Moreno, legal migrant to the United States from Colombia. Bernie Moreno deserves your vote. Great businessman, super candidate. Mike Rogers in Michigan. Lead story today, if I were not doing the election, would be the fact that a cargo plane and a passenger plane had devices put on them designed to explode them en route or when they landed over the air in America and Canada. We need an FBI agent, former head of the House Intel Committee in Michigan. Get out there and vote for him. They think it's Russians, by the way. I found that in news items by John Ellis, which is, I'm getting down to only reading news items now. I no longer trust the legacy media. We need Eric Hovde in Wisconsin. And if you are moved to vote right now, get out there and vote for Eric Hovde. Donald Trump, don't forget Derek Van Orden. Derek Van Orden is the SEAL who's been just wonderfully representative of Wisconsin for the last couple of years. Carrie Lake deserves your vote. She got a lead in Arizona, thanks to the work of Charlie Kirk and many others in the desert state. Carrie Lake has got a lead, but you got to close the deal. Sam Brown is the most deserving of every Senate candidate I've seen. West Point graduate, threw his body into the fight and is badly, grievously wounded in the long wars, but he's still in the fight. He's come back. Sam Brown deserves your vote, Nevada. Hung Kao deserves your vote, Virginia. These are veterans. These are Mike Rogers, by the way, also a veteran. I think of him as an FBI agent before all of that. I want to tell you that the most important thing when you're deciding whether to get up or not is, does your vote matter? Yes. This could be a one-vote election in many congressional districts. It could be a one-vote election in a state. I don't want to repeat of Florida 2000, where George W. Bush won the presidency by under 500 votes. In a conclusion confirmed by every independent study that's been done of the voting analysis since then. But we don't want close margins. We want a swamp the vote day. Election integrity is standing by. RNC Chairman Michael Whatley will be joining me later in the program to talk about that. Dr. Larry Arnn will be along from Hillsdale College later to talk about the duty of a citizen to vote. But it might be inconvenient. But please, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or independent, get up and vote. Want to beat the 158 million mark. That was 60-some% 4 years ago. We got to get to 70 and 75%. This is a consequential election, and your vote does indeed matter. So please get out and vote today. 78 million people have already voted. We should get that many or more today because some people like to wait. Some people are traditionalists. Some people need a lift. You might have to go babysit the kids. Do whatever you have to do. Help your neighbor out. Offer to pick up the groceries. Offer to drive them to the polls. But get out and vote. If they say I'm not registered, check the map. You can vote today, again, in Virginia, North Carolina, Michigan, Wisconsin, New Hampshire, New Mexico, Nevada, Montana. These are all states where you can show up with identification proof of residence. You've got to be a United States citizen. You'll be prosecuted if you aren't, because you've got to be a United States citizen to vote for president. Get out and vote for Donald Trump and all these great men and women running for the Senate and the House. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Don't forget Juan Suskamani in Tucson. Stay tuned. Hey, up there in Maine, get out and vote. Up there in Maine 2nd District, we need you. For Austin, get out and vote. My voice is almost back. Laryngitis for the last 5 days, but it's coming back. I'll be on the Salem News Channel, special election night coverage in the 6 p.m. hour. It starts at 5 p.m. Tonight, the election night coverage on the Salem News Channel. And I'll also be in early tomorrow across the Salem Radio Network and many of our affiliates at 5 a.m. I don't know when we're going to learn anything today. I know, do not trust exit polls. Get out and vote. Donald Trump, I've said from the beginning, the Yinzers are going to decide this election. Good Lord, it's up to the Steelers fans. And he finished in Pittsburgh last night, the former president did. Here is his announcement from the podium last night in Pittsburgh, cut number 5.
Oh, wow. I have some more big news, Megan. I'm just getting this right now. So somebody that's very, very respected asked me to do his show 2 weeks ago, and I said, why not? And to me, it's very big because he's the biggest there is, I guess, in that world by far. Somebody said the biggest beyond anybody in a long time. And his name is Joe Rogan, and he's never done this before. And it just came over the wires that Joe Rogan just endorsed me. Is that good?
This is amazing because Joe Rogan is not a political guy. He's a fabulous interviewer. He is a long-form podcaster. It's a different thing than I've done for a long time, but I respect his interview chop because he gets stuff out of people that rarely you get out of people, and he knows how to handle former President Trump and J.D. Vance. And Kamala Harris wouldn't go near him because she's afraid of her shadow. Ugh, Commander-in-Chief. I just dread the idea of her as Commander-in-Chief. Please get out and vote for Trump. And when Donald Trump announced that, maybe it jolted a few more of his demo off of the couch. And you may never have heard of Joe Rogan. I think it's a big deal. I also think Megyn Kelly is a big deal. She spoke last night as well. Cut number 6.
Hi, everybody. Hey, it's great to see you. Can you believe this guy? Can you believe the energy and the stamina on this guy? At his age, I'm ready to go to sleep over there. He's got another rally to go to till tonight. Let me tell you, first of all, one of the reasons why I wanted to come here, one of the many reasons I wanted to come here. When I launched my show 4 years ago, we had Mark Cuban on the program. You know, yeah. You may have seen he was in the news this week. And he started going on about how bad America's race history was and how ashamed he was of America, and that's why he was at all these protests, and he felt it was really important to stand up and speak out about human rights violations. And then it got awkward when I asked him about all the money he was taking from China. But then he dropped a bunch of F-bombs, and I thought, I really enjoy this feeling of proving Mark Cuban wrong. And so here I am at a Trump rally, a strong, intelligent woman to prove Mark Cuban wrong again.
That she goes on to endorse Donald Trump. God bless Megyn. The legacy media is falling apart because the news today is Joe Rogan and Megyn Kelly endorse Donald Trump. And they're both new media. Megyn's podcast is not as big as Joe Rogan's, but it's almost as big. And she's fabulous. She's a professional, and she could not live anymore in the deep blue bubble of Manhattan Beltway media elites. And she left, and she's fine. And do not watch them tonight. Do not subscribe to them anymore. They did not tell you the true story of this election, which is Kamala Harris is unprepared to be the commander-in-chief of the United States. Donald Trump has been and will be again. I'm feeling pretty good. Major vibe shift in the last couple of days towards Trump. And I could be wrong. I don't know. I have no idea who's going to win. There's too much data out there. I do think pretty conclusive that Donald Trump's going to win Arizona and Nevada, but you still need a blue wall state. Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Get out there. If you missed my opening monologue on vote, 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 It's already posted on my YouTube channel. Go over there and subscribe. You'll get it. We'll post everything that matters today. Last week, after the Hillsdale Dialogue, I asked Dr. Larry, president of Hillsdale College, to stay a little bit longer and tape a segment with me for this morning on the obligation of a citizen, not an obligation, it's a duty to vote. Here is the first part of that conversation, not a Hillsdale Dialogue, a special conversation about voting. I want to welcome back Dr. Arnn, who normally appears on Friday. This is not a Hillsdale Dialogue. This is Dr. Arnn as a guest. Dr. Arnn just talking to me. Just answering my question. How do you explain to people why they've got to get off the couch and vote on Election Day?
Well, that's the only way we have to manage our government, the only way for us to participate in self-government. And voting is crucial. What are the things that are also attendant upon being voting? People should think and learn and study. And not just about the issues, right? What do the issues mean? You're a lawyer and everything looks like a court case. I'm a college professor and everything looks like a classroom, right? I think the obligation of a citizen is to inform himself on the meaning of the country, its original claims, and the later counterclaims that have gained a lot of strength, right? And make an informed comparison of those things. And then it's not just watching ads on TV. You know, it's harder to read the Federalist Papers than it is to watch ads on TV. The difference is it's good for one. And the ads are not bad because when it gets down to the utmost particular, as Aristotle would say, how you make a choice, then knowing what they stand for is a very good idea. And this year I don't watch very much on TV, but I do watch football on the weekends, and the football ads are pretty good on both sides. Better, I think, on the side that I prefer. But and so you do learn a lot from them, right? You should be a discriminating viewer, and that means you need to read some stuff and think about it. And the equipment to be a citizen is to understand two things. One's a kind of philosophic thing, the laws of nature and of nature's God, where your rights come from, where you are defined. And the other is the basic operation and aims of the Constitution of the United States. And those are two finite subjects. And everybody should know those things by the time they finish high school. It's not that hard. As I like to say, school is not rocket science until it gets to rocket science. And it does get there.
Let me conclude this part by saying I've been telling everyone who tells me Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, and I don't want you to be partisan, I just want you to comment on this, is that they don't understand the Constitution, and the Constitution is very strong. Very, very strong. It was imperfect at its framing. It has been amended. It is very, very strong. And what they worry about, they're inventing in their mind, because he has not got the least interest at all in being an authoritarian, much less the fascist. And even if he did, our Constitution would stop that. Am I wrong?
Well, I don't know that I think it's as strong these days as you do. And when I worry about it being threatened, I worry about the size of the government, the engineering of elections toward partisan purposes, the prosecution of people in public life, the unaccountability of powerful people, the fact that a government controlling half the economy is by definition the largest potential customer of any country, any company, but also a regulatory authority over every company. I do worry about those things. I do not think those things come from Donald Trump.
I am an optimist that because the court is currently, this is not forever. You have to win your freedom every generation, to borrow from Ronald Reagan. But the court, as currently composed, and as it will continue to grow, is anti-progressive era ideology and pro-originalist ideology. That makes me happy, and I think people who want to sleep on that are wrong.
So you're very right. The court is one of the checks and balances, right? One of the checks is the court. The court's pretty good to my eye right now, right? But isn't it?
Yes.
But remember, first it's one of the checks, not the most fundamental, by the way. But the second thing, isn't the platform of one of the parties to expand the court? And,
yes.
And if they had the votes to do that, they'd have the votes to appoint people of a different temper, and they'd probably be pretty good at that. And
and I have an argument that is itself unconstitutional. They have forever changed the number. Since the last time the court changed was after the Civil War and after the 14th Amendment, so I have trouble making this argument. But the overturn of the rule of law comes with the expansion of the court. The rule of law is done then. And
see what that's a big thing, right? The rule of law is basically an expression that means it's not the strong who run the society, it's everyone, right? And that means one of the symptoms of it, one of the clearest symptoms of it, is when you go before a judge, shouldn't matter who you are. It should only matter what you did, and it should only matter what a law says that is understandable and well known, right? And today the law is, you've had Justice Gorsuch. I'm going to be with him in February, I learned, and his book Overruled. It's just an illustration of a point by Madison, which he quotes, that if there's so many laws and they change so much that nobody knows what they say, then it's not the rule of law, even if it's made by elected people, which ours are not today. So the point is, the rule of law is threatened, right? My own view is that, let me quote Bill Barr. Bill Barr turned against Donald Trump.
Though he will vote for him on Election Day.
This time.
He said so.
But he said once in an article, and he worked for Trump, and he's a man of great experience, and he's like Hewitt, a lawyer, and like Hewitt, pretty smart. And he said, I don't see what he's done in his first administration that circumvents the rule of law. When they say he will circumvent the rule of law, what they say is he will defy the authority of the bureaucratic class. That's really what he means. They mean. And I think perhaps he will do that. Did before.
We will see, but I want to close. We have 2 minutes. Do people need to vote? I mean, they have to go and vote. They can't. Yeah. If they disagree with me, I don't care. They have to vote. It's the basic obligation of a citizen. I don't know what the root of citizen is.
It's
got to be.
It means the same thing as civil. It's Civitas is the Latin word, and it means citizen or city, civic order, right? So it's a very good thing, in my opinion, in America, that they don't have to vote. That would be the legal requirement of the Soviet Union. They have a duty to vote. They ought to vote, and they ought to think about it first, and not just
right there. We'll come back and play part 2 later. They have a duty to vote, not the law that you have to vote. You have a duty to vote because we are a free people. We govern ourselves, and the government is out of control, and it's broken. It's too big and it's broken. It doesn't protect us from enemies, both foreign and domestic. Let me play you, as just an odd way of making this point. Scott Jennings last night on CNN, a eulogy for Peanut the squirrel. Cut number 1.
Well, I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of Peanut the squirrel. God rest his tiny soul. Not since the squirrel that was taught to water ski has a squirrel caught the nation's attention like this one. Now, this squirrel was squirrel napped and murdered by the state of New York. An absurd abuse of government overreach There are 40 million rats or something in New York, and they executed the only one trained to wear a cowboy hat and had an Instagram account. My condolences to Mark Longo, who cared for Peanut for 7 years, and to the cowardly neighbors who filed the complaints about Mr. Longo's animals, which also included Fred the raccoon. I ask, why are you the way that you are? I hope you're happy, you monsters. R.I.P. Peanut.
The key point is they sent 12 people from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation and the local county with a search warrant to nab a squirrel with an Instagram account of 500,000 people and a raccoon named Fred. The squirrel is Peanut. The raccoon is Fred. This is Mr. Longo, if you're watching on the Salem News Channel. It's the government sent 12 people to do that. We've got 12 million people coming into the country because we can't enforce the border. We cannot keep people from pushing people onto subways. We cannot stop crime in California, but we can send 12 people from the state of New York on your dime to seize a squirrel and a raccoon. Vote against that. Vote for Donald Trump. Let me check the markets, brought to you by our friends at AmericanFederal.com. And I say our friends. I've sat down with Nick Rovich and have gone over this with him. I've long wanted Nick Rovich to be my sponsor because a lot of people buy and sell gold in America. A lot of people want to buy gold. And this morning, gold is at $2,751.80 an ounce because people are worried about the world. They are very, very nervous about the world, and they should be. Gold has been for a long time where people go put their money when they want to diversify and avoid risk. And gold has more than kept pace with inflation, which has been enormous under Biden and Harris, more than 20%. So gold prices have gone up. Central banks are buying gold. Well, the market had a good day yesterday. Dow was up 0.69, the S&P up 0.41, the NASDAQ up 0.8%. Palantir had a monster quarter, so I'm going to be a happy guy today if I look, but I don't look at, I don't trade. I own 3 stocks, Amazon, Microsoft, and Palantir, all great American companies invested in artificial intelligence. But I own gold, and when I buy gold, I will buy it with AmericanFederal.com. Call them at 1-800-221-7694. 1-800-221-7694. They also buy your gold from you. If you need to sell it because you're short because of this Biden-Harris economy, call up at AmericanFederal.com. 1-800-221-7694. I'm laughing and smiling because I just saw it and I reposted over at my X account. Margot Martin is the Deputy Comms Director and a brilliant one for the former and I think future President Donald Trump. She posted at 2:15 this morning, Eastern Time, a video of former President Trump dancing off a rally stage at 2:15 in the morning. I do not understand that man's energy. I just don't. It's just so remarkable. Let's conclude my conversation with Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College. This is not a Hillsdale dialogue. It's my conversation with him, taped last week, about the duty of a citizen on Election Day.
Minutes. You know, in Michigan, I voted in Michigan already, and there were some names on my ballot that I didn't know, and I did a little research and decided which ones I was for. That's important, but that's the beginning of it. You know, the real thing is we are supposed to be fit to govern ourselves. What does it take to do that? You should think and study and talk. And, you know, and I will tell you, if I'm optimistic about things, what I really believe is that we're in a great crisis and we don't know how it's going to come out. But when I'm optimistic, and I believe in being optimistic, 4.6 million people have taken online courses with Hillsdale College. And they grew by 1 million in the last 12 months. What are they about?
Can I encourage you with one last thing? I did a podcast last week actually, called The Ruthless Podcast, made up of, it's probably the most popular conservative political podcast in terms of professionals, operatives. They all work for McConnell. And we were talking about the news media and its descent into absolute partisan madness, which has happened to all the legacy media outlets. So much so that Jeff Bezos wrote his famous or infamous, depending on which you think, letter. And one of the guys volunteered, the only way to save the media is for them to fire a lot of people in their newsrooms and hire Hillsdale graduates. I did not prompt that.
Yeah,
I did
yeah,
not
yeah.
prompt that. But
We got a lot
I
of them doing
think it's
that.
about, yeah, it's what
Yeah.
needs to happen for everyone. But
Yeah, and you get,
thank you for
if
your,
you get, yeah, you need to, if you remember, learning is an act of obedience, and that means you have to go find some stuff out, and you can't have in your mind at every minute, what do I think about this? You have to have in your mind, what does this mean, right? And if you go through that rigorously, through the whole core curriculum of Hillsdale College, you'll learn a lot of stuff, and it'll make you a better journalist. And a lot of them don't do that today.
it would make such a difference in the Republic if
Mm-hmm.
if not even if a majority, but if they own 10% of media were Hillsdale graduates, it would improve by 50% or 100% in quality. Dr. Aaron, we are out of time. Thank you for your message about duty and about study. Can I get one quick prediction from you? Mike Rogers going to win up there?
Yeah, I think so. All right, I could look real quick. It's very close. Michigan is, I did take the trouble to go back and look at the Real Clear averages, and I hope I didn't get them wrong. It's not really my line of work, but from 2020, and they are more Republican, significantly more than they were in 2020. So I don't,
He's a good man. He's a smart man. He's a serious man. And he will protect the country, and he believes in borders, and he believes in Israel. And I just think he's a very good man. I hope he wins. I can endorse, you can't. I endorse him. I've had him on a lot. I'm just very impressed with him. We have great candidates.
Yeah.
McCormick in Pennsylvania, and Marino in Ohio, and Hovde in Wisconsin. Hung Cao I got to vote for, a Vietnamese immigrant who did EOD, explosive ordnance disposal, for 25 years, captain in the Navy. We got great they got Jim Banks coming from Indiana. We got great candidates. I'm an optimist about the Senate.
Yeah. And I hear the House is close, but one thing to remember is, first of all, you don't want to bank your life on a result, right? All the best football coaches, they keep score at the end. You'll be disappointed if you lose. But the truth is, you have to focus everything you do on what you do, right? So what people should be thinking about is, how can I be? Last night I gave a talk to a whole bunch of people, and I said, somebody said, what should we do? I said, study and teach, and it will make you a better citizen. So those are three things. Be a good citizen, learn, and help others learn.
Well said. Dr. Larry Aaron of Hillsdale College. That was last week. That was before I quit the Washington Post. Didn't know I was going to quit the Washington Post. Just want you to know that for the context of the piece. Hillsdale.edu for all those wonderful courses that people have taken. Coming up, Byron York, Brett Baer. I got so many great people. Michael Whatley, chairman of the Republican National Committee, joins me. Don't go anywhere except over to the YouTube channel if you missed my opening monologue, because I can't replay it today. I got guest-heavy stuff. Senator Tom Cotton is coming up, Josh Kraushaar. I got lots to do on election morning. And then make a plan. Go out and vote. Remember, in many states, Virginia and Maryland, Michigan and Wisconsin, Nevada and New Mexico, you can register today and vote if you bring citizenship, proof of residence, and go out for the first time ever. If you're 18, you can vote if you're a citizen. It's Election Day. Get out there and vote if you haven't already. 78 million Americans have voted. Byron York joins me, Fox News contributor and Washington Examiner columnist extraordinaire. You can follow him on X at Byron York. Good morning, Byron. Where are you this morning inside the Beltway?
Good morning, Hugh. I am in Palm Beach, Florida, where
oh my goodness,
President Trump will have his event tonight, whatever it is, and I will hopefully be there to cover it.
So, Byron, I would like, you are a reporter as well as having opinions every now and then. What do you think about this election, its major stories, and its data points that the audience ought to know about as Election Day dawns?
Well, I mean, the thing to remember that we began talking this way, and it's still true, and this is an entirely historic election in the sense that one of the candidates has been president of the United States before, and that changed everything. And the second thing about it is it's the second election in a row, presidential election, in which Democrats wanted to and tried to and did change established practices or laws or other ways of running an election. This one they did a real doozy, which is to withdraw their candidate on July 21st and come up with an entirely new candidate for the final 3 months of the campaign. So this is an extraordinarily different election from anything anybody in living memory has experienced.
I agree. There's also a new set of facts, which is the early voting is 78 million. And there's a lot of facts within that. Vibes are simply projections of opinions dressed up as facts, right? Vibes don't exist. There are facts. 78 million people have voted. Republicans have done overwhelmingly better than I've ever seen them do in that. And turnout in major centers, like I was just looking at the Cuyahoga County numbers, but Detroit and Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, those machines are down 20, 25%. Those are Democrat strongholds. What do these facts tell you as opposed to this idiocy about vibes? I've really had it with vibes, Byron, as you might be able to tell.
Well, the facts say that Republicans have embraced early voting in a way that they certainly didn't before, because I think one of the biggest tactical mistakes that Donald Trump made in 2020 was to discourage early and mail-in voting among his supporters, which meant that he bet everything on turnout on Election Day, while Democrats had every single day banked millions of votes before Election Day. So Trump figured that out and did not discourage early voting this time. And I did have one political professional say, well, yeah, it's going better because Trump isn't telling people not to vote this time. So there is, though, the question of cannibalization, which is, that is, if members of your party, your own supporters, vote early when they would have voted on Election Day, there's really no difference except you'll get fewer votes on Election Day. I'm not sure that's the case here because of what are called low propensity voters who appear to be turning out for Trump. Plus, I do believe that especially the women voters who are really, really anti-Trump, I believe they're very inclined to vote early. So if there is cannibalization going on, it may be occurring on the Democratic side. But could I say one more thing about early voting?
Yes, please.
Well, a lot of people like me think it's a bad idea. I think Election Day should be Election Day. But that's not the way it works now. But one of the arguments for Election Day being Election Day is that voters get to see the entire campaign and take into account all of the events that happen up to Election Day, and then they make a decision. Now, you've probably been seeing in the last few days, Democrats have been absolutely giddy about the last few days of the campaign. They think Harris has closed just flawlessly, and they believe Trump has blown his lead in the last few minutes of the game. And they point to a number of Trump, quote, mistakes, meaning the Madison Square Garden rally on October 27th, his statement on October 30th that he's going to protect women whether they like it or not, and this, quote, firing squad thing about Liz Cheney on October 31. I went back and looked at the early voting. And by the time Trump took the stage at Madison Square Garden, 44 million people had already voted. By the time he said he was going to protect women whether they like it or not, 55 million people had already voted. And just the very next day, when he talked about the Liz Cheney, quote, firing squad, more than 60 million people had already voted. It doesn't matter what Trump said to them because they never knew about it before their vote.
That's a good point. I'll point out as well that the corrections to the context in each of those circumstances and the Joe Biden garbage comment and the garbage truck, again, many people have nothing. I voted before all that happened. The late breaking news, because we are in a 20-minute news cycle, I would like your assessment of this on election morning, Byron York, for the 70 million people who are still going to vote today, are Joe Rogan, Megyn Kelly, and Peanut the squirrel.
Yes. Well, obviously, Rogan's endorsement. I wonder why people endorse at the very last second because it really does take time to get out there. But these are actually positive things for Trump, and the whole peanut the squirrel thing is really quite extraordinary. But it's amazing how many sort of Democrats have associated peanut with MAGA, and therefore they're not disturbed by what happened. So what can I say about these final, sort of trivial moments in the end of the campaign? They do seem to be helping Trump.
I do think the peanut execution, euthanasia, whatever the word is, 12 people went to Mr. Longo's home from the Department of Environmental Concerns or whatever they call it, and the county. And I just think for a lot of people, this is the sort of story, organic as it is. I mean, it develops on social media. It's not covered. It's not pushed by legacy media, which is just broken badly beyond repair. And I just think that the peanut story gathers in so many people's as broken as the New York Department of Environmental Conservation is, it's as badly broken as the border and as our intelligence system, as our deterrence. It kind of comes together as a piece. Now, I don't want to go into vibe land, but it's a real deal for people.
I think you're going into vibe land on it, as a matter of fact.
Good morning.
Clearly, the overkill and the abuse of official agencies and official power. I mean, they got warrants to enter this man's house to kill the squirrel. And it just seems extraordinary. Plus, the nationalization of this kind of thing, that Peanut was fingered by a woman in Texas who had been looking at this on Instagram. I mean, this wasn't even a neighbor who was concerned about a wild animal in the house next to her or something like that. So I agree to you. I agree with you that it makes pro-Republican points here, but I do think that is vibe-landed.
I would like to know why they didn't call him. The story to me, I've been dealing with endangered species since I got out of the government in the Reagan years in 1989, and with environmental agencies. I've retired from the active practice of law now. Yeah, agencies can call people up and talk about issues. They don't have to do a raid for 5 hours with 12 people. I'm just so astonished by our government. Byron, I want to get some predictions from you on the Senate, the House, and the presidency, and we'll go into the break if we have to, but let's start with the presidency. Do you have a prediction whether Donald Trump will win electoral college? And by the way, the popular vote does not matter to me in the least. The constitutional majority is the electoral college. What do you think, Byron York?
Well, I do not have a prediction, but I will say, as we speak, the Real Clear Politics average of polls nationally of the popular vote is literally tied, 48.5 to 48.5. And in the past, and all the way up till now, most people have believed because of the Electoral College advantage, a tie means Trump wins.
That is my understanding as well. And I do believe that there are some obvious things out there like Nevada and Arizona. Do you want to opine on those two states?
What do you mean with the...
which way they're going in the presidential?
Well, the early voting in Nevada has been quite interesting. And you've talked about what John Ralston has been writing. He made his final prediction and predicted that Harris would win by 0.3%.
It's an absurd thing. I unfollowed John. I just unfollowed him. It's absurd.
Which was kind of amazing. But, I mean, basically his conclusion was, look, it doesn't look good for Harris, but John Ralston, think the Harry Reid machine will just find the votes somewhere. And I think that's his conclusion. And maybe that's true in Nevada. I don't know.
But it's wish casting as a journalist.
It is wish casting.
And so I just said I can't trust him anymore, and so I stopped following him. I wanted to go through the Senate and the House with him. Byron, I think Jim Justice is going to be Senator-elect Justice, and Tim Sheehy is going to be Senator-elect Sheehy in West Virginia and Montana, respectively. And then there are 9 more races. Dave McCormick in Pennsylvania, Bernie Moreno in Ohio. These are the Republican candidates. Mike Rogers in Michigan, Eric Hovde in Wisconsin, Terry Lake in Arizona, Sam Brown in Nevada, Larry Hogan in Maryland, Hung Cao in Virginia, and Nella Domenici in New Mexico. So what do you expect the Senate to look like in numbers? And then tell me any specifics you've got after that.
Well, I expect that Republicans will win control of the Senate. I mean, obviously, West Virginia is done, and I think Wyoming is done. So there's
You mean
control
Montana,
right there.
right? You mean Montana?
I'm sorry, Montana is done. So I think that takes care of it right there. Of the other races, I think the Ohio thing is really striking. I mean, that's an extremely close race between Brown and Moreno, and I got to say, it's not looking that great for him. It's
For who?
It's not looking that great for Sherrod Brown, in my
Exactly. He's just too liberal for Ohio. He's just the numbers, the early vote, Cuyahoga County being down. Bernie's a great candidate. He's run through the tape. I feel like he's going to win, but I also think Dave McCormick has run practically, well, actually, maybe the most flawless Senate race I've ever seen.
Yeah, and Bob Casey's race it just has the smell of fear about it, which is Bob Casey's coming at it every moment and said, "I stood with Donald Trump," and you think, wow, that is not a confident Democratic candidate there. So I think that's possibly a real problem, and most important, also, I think Republicans are not going to lose any seats. So these are all gains. So I think you're talking at least 51, which means Republican control of the Senate, regardless of who controls the White House.
And so I'm going to go. I think that I just always split the difference. They got to have at least 53 at the end of the night, unless I've just misjudged everything, which is possible, very possible. How about the House? Because I had Speaker McCarthy on yesterday. Upbeat Kevin McCarthy is still upbeat about our friend Derek Van Orden, about Juan Ciscomani, about Mike Lawler. I mean, he knows the map like nobody knows the map. What do you think, Byron York?
I tend to go with Kevin McCarthy on these things. I think you and I have discussed this on the air before. He's the world's most organized man. And he knew, as Speaker of the House, and when he was in lower positions before that, he knew the entire Republican caucus. He knew them all. He knew their families. He knew how much money the committees had given them. He knew where their strong points were, where their weak points, what their votes were, and all of that. So I think if you look at the Real Clear Politics average of polls now, you see an advantage for Republicans right now with 201 seats right now, 109 for Democrats, 39 in the middle somewhere. And I think you're going to end up with Speaker Johnson.
Now, I want to close on that. I think Byron is among the most responsible reporters in the business. We don't know anything, Byron. I will not be surprised by anything tomorrow morning. Yeah. You agree with that?
Yeah, I think maybe it was yesterday I did my newsletter. I mean, the frightening thing about this is that we are all of our talk, all of it is based on our readings of polls that may not be accurate. We may be standing on the 17th floor of a house of cards, and the wind is coming up by this evening. And so I don't really know what to say here, other than I wouldn't bet my house on any of this stuff.
Well put. Byron York, thank you. Follow him on X at Byron York. Watch him tonight on Fox News. Read his stuff in the Washington Examiner. Thank you, Byron.
Thank you, Hugh.
Project 2025, much maligned, not Donald Trump's document, but the work of the fabulous conservative scholars. And that doesn't mean anything other than they're center right. There's a big rainbow of opinion over at the Heritage Foundation. And if you go to 25truth.com, you'll find that the Heritage Foundation has put up the truth about Project 2025, which is that spectrum of ideas in the conservative world, which range all over the place. Some of them I like, some of them I loathe. A lot of people in there I would love to see in a Trump administration 2.0, some I would not want back, but that's what think tanks are for. And 25truth.com is the Heritage Foundation attempt to fight back against the legacy media's narrative that they are, the brain of the incoming administration. No, they're a think tank. This is what they do. Kevin Roberts runs a great ship. And if you visit 25truth.com, all right, not hard to remember, 25truth.com, you may hear legacy media nattering about it as they fill the hours until late tonight or early tomorrow morning, or even tomorrow, Wednesday. They'll be talking about Project 2025. 25truth.com is where you need to go and look. So, Generalissimo, I want to give you 2 minutes here, maybe a minute and a half. What do you think?
I think it's going to be a quicker called night than is being led to believe. I'm just stacking the numbers up in Pennsylvania, and here is then and now in Pennsylvania as quick as I can. In 2020, Joe Biden took 1.1 million banked votes into Election Day. Okay. This time, Kamala Harris is going to go into Election Day with somewhere around 400,000. She's 700,000 votes behind where she was, or where Joe Biden was 4 years ago. 4 years ago, the party ID makeup in Pennsylvania was Democrats had a 630,000 vote edge over registered Republicans in the Keystone State. This time, it's been cut in almost half. The deficit is now about 300,000. Okay? So you've got a much more Republican base than there was 4 years ago. On same-day voting 4 years ago, the Republicans outperformed Democrats on same-day voting alone 66 to 34%.
Well, then with 30 seconds to go, Yinzers, get out and vote. I can't believe it. Steelers fans, please do the right thing.
If they've turned out like they did 4 years ago, and they even have more Republicans this time to work with.
Election day, polls are open in the East. They will open, of course, across the rest of the country. Get out and vote. There's same-day registration and voting in Michigan and in Wisconsin, in Virginia and North Carolina, many other places. If you are a citizen of the United States, you bring proof of residency and citizenship, you'll be able to vote. File a provisional if you can't. Persuade the election registrar of voters that you're trying to follow the law. Chairman Michael Whatley has turned the Republican National Committee into an election integrity machine and turnout machine. He joins me now. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. How are you doing this morning? It's going to be a long day, I assume.
I'm excited. I am upbeat. Greetings from Palm Beach, Florida. We had a great day with President Trump yesterday, 4 different rallies around the country, and landed about an hour ago, and we're ready to get to the election.
You know, I just told people about Margot Martin pushing out the photo of the president, former president, and I think future president, dancing at 2:15 in the morning in Pittsburgh. Where does the guy's energy come from, Mr. Chairman?
It is absolutely unreal, and he was in a great mood all day, and very, very excited about Election Day, and really ready to, I think, hit the ground running here.
Now, the early vote numbers are impressive, and I am among the early voters in Virginia. Do you expect the quote, cannibalization effect to occur, or do you expect Republicans to turn out in massive numbers today as well?
We expect that today is going to be a big day. We were very, very happy that in every state where we were tracking the early vote numbers, that we were not seeing as much cannibalization of the, Election Day voting as we had anticipated. In fact, across the board, really about 10% of all of the votes that came in were people that had not voted at all in 2020.
Now, how about new voters this time? Do you expect a large surge, especially we're talking about younger people, especially young men, the Joe Rogan demographic? What do you expect?
Yeah, we do. And I think that, you're going to obviously have a lot of new movers, people that turn 18 and get a chance to register. But we also have targeted people who weren't registered as well as low propensity voters. So the percentage of voters that did not vote in 2020, we expect is going to be very healthy.
Now, talk to us about election integrity. I am up on the effort because I heard you with the Ruthless Fellows last week. That's why I was aware of the Bucks County lawsuit, the successful lawsuit brought by the RNC. And some of my former colleagues at the Washington Post were not, because I had heard you on Ruthless. Thank you for setting up the operation. Thank you for telling people about it. But Bucks County is just one case. Are you covered across the country on election integrity and administration issues?
Yes. So we really have 2 big things that we're working on in the election integrity space. The first is making sure that we have the rules of the road set up before voting starts. So we have worked with legislatures. We have tried very hard to make sure basic rules are in place. Only American citizens can vote. You have to have a voter ID. we want the states to clean up their voter rolls. And in states where you have mail-in ballots, we want basic protections in place for those mail-in ballots. The second thing that we have set up is you have to be in the room. So we have recruited 6,500 attorneys all across the country. We have 230,000 volunteers. We have trained them, and we are going to be deploying them today as volunteers, poll workers and poll observers. And so we are monitoring and working that all through our state parties as well as at our headquarters at the campaign.
Now, I want to bring up an example, which doesn't really matter because Missouri's a red state. But St. Louis, I got so inured to the St. Louis has decided to keep their elections open long, and the Republicans having to go in and say, yeah, you know, this is hinky, and have them shut down because weird stuff was going on. St. Louis isn't really in play. Missouri isn't in play. Josh Hawley's going to win easily. But what about that? Do we have to revisit the same old places? Is that where the lawyers are? Are they in new places?
Well, they are across the country. And I think that any time that we see a situation pop up where you have the administrators, the boards of elections, counties or whatever, who are running the elections are acting outside the law, then we are definitely going to be working aggressively to try and intervene.
You know, in the year 2004, I read a New York Times bestseller, If It's Not Close, They Can't Cheat. And it's based on the history of election cheating in the United States, which is very interesting, but also scandalous, but also had been going away until COVID hit and people's worries about the integrity of elections skyrocketed. Have you got back to where we were in 2016, where the race was for Trump and it was over early because everyone knew and nobody disputed it and there weren't any hinky things going on? You think we're back to 2016 integrity levels?
Well, we certainly hope so. And every time the president says that we need this election too big to rig, that is exactly what he's talking about. What we want to make sure is that if it's going to be close in any given state, that we are there. You may recall in 2000, President Bush and Al Gore had a major recount down in Florida, and we were in the room. I was in the room as one of the attorneys, and we were fighting over every single ballot because at the end of the day, it was less than 500 ballots that determined who was going to be the president of the United States. So anytime you have a really, really close election, you're going to have what I think of as French warfare, just in terms of which ballots are going to be counted, which ones are going to be discounted, you know, who's going to be in, who's going to be out, when did the ballots come in. These are all fights that are going to take place. But if it ends up being a 2, 3, 4, 5 point victory in a given state, then those margins are not going to matter as much.
Before I go to the Senate and the House, Mr. Chairman, I want to ask you about your home state of North Carolina. Do you feel that everyone, Helene ravaged the state. Do you feel that everyone who wants to vote will be able to vote or already has voted in North Carolina?
Yes, we feel very good about the relationship we had with the state legislature, the fact that they passed a couple bills that helped us make sure that we had early voting locations in every one of the affected counties, as well as the county boards who were able to go ahead and set up the polling locations. And a lot of them we needed to move. Some of them we needed additional voting centers. Some places we needed to knock them down a couple, you know, from the original lists, just to make sure that everything on the ground, you know, was there. But everybody who wants to vote has the opportunity to vote. We were very happy to see on the first day of early voting last Thursday that we actually broke an all-time record for first day turnout.
That's fabulous. Now, Mr. Chairman, I want to turn to the Senate. Not many people are old enough to remember the 1980 election. I was in law school at the University of Michigan when Democratic incumbent senators went down like traps at a trap shoot. And I think that could happen tonight. I think Dave McCormick has run a perfect campaign. Really, maybe the best Senate campaign I've ever seen. Bernie Moreno ran a great campaign. Eric Hovde's run a great campaign. Kerry Lake and the RNC and Charlie Kirk and others have built up this amazing edge that I think Kerry Lake might win. I haven't even ruled out Sam Brown or Hung Cao or Larry Hogan or Nella Domenici. What do you think about the Senate? I haven't talked about Justice Rashid, but what do you think about Mike Rogers, for example?
Well, I was with Mike last night. He has run a very, very solid campaign. it is right at the margin. And, if President Trump has a really good day in Michigan, as we expect, I think that Mike is going to be in a really good position. We're going to win West Virginia. We're going to win Montana. We're going to win Ohio. That gives us a baseline of 52. And we'll wait and see. The rest of those races, I think, are going to depend on what Donald Trump's margins are going to be and kind of what the turnout looks like today. But every single one of those candidates you mentioned is in a really good position to get across the line.
Two more questions. I'll let you go. Long day. I appreciate your taking the time, Mr. Chairman. Does the House stay with Speaker Mike Johnson in the Republican majority?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that they're in a good position to pick up, whether it's going to be 2, 4, 6, 8 seats, somewhere in there. Of course, when you come into it with a 2-seat margin, every seat is going to help. We've got a number of states where we have pickup opportunities with the way that the elections are moving. North Carolina had a redistricting, and we expect we're going to pick up 4. You have a number of seats in California and New York where Republicans hold seats that Joe Biden carried in the 2020 election cycle. So those are going to be hard to hold on to. But we are very bullish, have had a number of good conversations with Richard Hudson, who is a very capable chairman of the NRCC, and Speaker Johnson, and feel like we're really in a good position to expand that majority.
My very last question has to do with Team Trump, because at my old network, MSNBC, last night, they were peddling a vibe that Team Trump is dispirited and out of sorts and mad at the candidate. I think it's nonsense, but people can say anything in legacy media now and just project wishcast. How is it inside the plane, on the ground, at headquarters?
Absolutely fantastic environment, and we could not have been better. I think that, just when you look at the president and his performance at all of the rallies that we have been at over the course of the last week, we had 3 of them on Friday, we had 3 of them on Saturday, 3 of them on Sunday, 4 of them yesterday. The team feels very, very good about where we are. Our polling looks very, very good. The early vote, the absentee vote numbers are very solid. And this team, we're excited and we're ready to go.
Chairman Michael Whatley of the Republican National Committee, thank you for joining me. I appreciate the time this morning, and I know you have a long day. I hope you get some naps in the course of this day.
Excellent. Hugh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. I'll tell you, I want to get back to Generalissimo. Dwayne, there, you had someone finally agree with your optimism. I'm not optimistic. I just don't want to be over my skis.
Well, and I understand that. Could I be wrong? Could we all be wrong? Yes. Here is the difference between 2012 and today. In 2012, all we had to go on was internal polling, right? We didn't have early vote data like we have today. We didn't have all the metrics and all the analysis and all the raw numbers, and we didn't see registered Republicans increasing by 300,000 in swing states in 2012 like we do today. Again, it's possible that all the data is completely wrong and that everybody on our side is going to sit it out today. God forbid. Is that possible? Sure, it is, and we could all be wrong. But I'm telling you, the data, if you just analytically look at the data, you can't come to any other conclusion that this may not be as close as we're being sold.
Dwayne is our optimist. I am our pessimist, and that's okay, because we don't know anything, because it's America, and the vote is secret, and you get to vote today, and if you haven't, please get up and go vote. David Drucker is in the House, he of the Washington Examiner, and excuse me, the Dispatch. David Drucker,
Thanks,
where do
Hugh.
we find you this morning?
The airport in Philadelphia. I'm headed to Palm Beach.
Oh, I am so glad I don't have to do this election night stuff. Because we're not going to know anything until in the wee hours of the morning. Are you with me on that? Dwayne is way optimistic. I am not pessimistic. I'm just very skeptical of believing we'll know anything before the end of the day.
Yeah, listen, we're not going to know. If by the end of the day, you mean by midnight, it's possible
Midnight,
we'll know. Yeah, it's possible we'll know something by midnight. It's possible we'll have a good idea by midnight. It's also possible we won't. I've been on the road since last Wednesday. I hit Arizona, Wisconsin, And then Pennsylvania, I'm off to the Trump election night event in South Florida. And I've come away from this with no gut feel and no prediction. I've interviewed voters on both sides. I've seen events on both sides. Everybody looks energized. Everybody looks hopeful. There's probably a little bit more, say, optimism on the side of Trump voters than Harris voters, because a lot of Harris voters have what I like to call, and what they have called in conversations to me, 2016 PTSD. They understand that Trump can win, and they've experienced that before. But whether you're looking at polls or polling analysis, it's choose your own adventure. There's something to make everybody feel hopeful, and I'm just trying to report what I see.
That's what I'm trying to do, David. And what I see in our 20-minute news cycle is 78 million people have voted. I expect 70 million people to vote today because I think we're going to have turnout at least equal to that of 4 years ago. And the last three stories are Joe Rogan endorses Trump, Megyn Kelly endorses Trump and appears with him, and Peanut the squirrel. I mean, did you see that? Did you have any idea we would be talking about this?
Yeah, I'm not surprised, but no, I never could have predicted Peanut the squirrel at the very least. The other two, I might have predicted that if you had asked me.
Well, I got to say, did you go to the Pittsburgh rally last night?
No, I was in Philadelphia for the closing Harris rally yesterday. My colleague Charles Hillu was in Reading, Pennsylvania for one of Trump's final rallies. And my colleague Mike Warren was in Michigan over the weekend and saw J.D. Vance in Flint. I also saw Josh Shapiro on Sunday with the mayor of Philadelphia. So we tried to spread ourselves around, and it's just, I mean, it may not finish close. As I was telling Dwayne before we got on, nothing would surprise me, and I mean that. A Trump sweep of the battlegrounds, a Harris sweep of the battlegrounds, something that we don't know until next week. Nothing would surprise me because I could make a plausible case for each if we had enough time this morning.
I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. I've consumed everything. We may have too much coverage, but the reason the Dispatch is ascendant and Joe Rogan and Megyn Kelly and our friends at Fox News is because Legacy's media is broken. And I'm just trying to filter out wish casting from facts. And the facts don't tell us much other than we're going to have a big vote today, don't you think?
We do. And look, there are things we don't know. Like, here's something we don't know. 4 years ago, we were in the midst of a pandemic. People were afraid of getting sick and dying. And so the mail vote was particularly large, but it was particularly large with Democrats. We are no longer in a pandemic situation. And so Democrats are expecting a much healthier election day vote than happened 4 years ago. At the same time, Republicans this time around got on board with mail and early voting. So we've seen them voting early and by mail in healthier numbers. But how does that all shake out? And again, it only matters where it shakes out in the races that matter. I know we know this, Hugh, but it doesn't matter how it shakes out in California for the purposes of the presidency. House race is another matter. It matters how it shakes out in Pennsylvania and those 6 other states we're watching.
Last question, David, about the House. I've given the Senate scorecard enough. Speaker McCarthy was on yesterday, former Speaker Kevin McCarthy. He's feeling good about the Republicans holding the House. What is your sense from battleground races that you followed about the House?
Well, I've seen positive signs for both, and I have to concede here. I have not covered the House close the way I would in a midterm year. I've just been kind of consumed by the top of the ticket. But every indication we're getting is that it's a competitive race for the House majority, unlike the Senate, where Republicans just have a clear edge unless we ended up an upside down world in Montana and elsewhere. And we don't have any indication of that. I mean, Republicans have an opportunity to win a small majority or a much better than small majority. But the House is truly a battleground, and we're just going to have to see.
And that means everyone listening, get out there and vote. And down ticket races, stay true to your Republican values. We've got to have a Republican House with Speaker Johnson, a Republican Senate with a new leader that we don't know the identity of yet. David M. Drucker on X with the Dispatch. Thank you, David. Safe travels to you today. Thank you for joining me from an airport. Never easy to do this sort of thing, a video hit, especially from a a busy Philadelphia airport. Though it's a fine airport. I was there working in Pennsylvania for Dave McCormick and the Salem team 2 weeks ago. It's a fine airport. I hadn't been in the Philly airport in a long, long time. Coming back with Brett Baer. Talk about someone who got a long day ahead of him. I get to go to bed if it's going on forever. Not Brett. We'll talk with Brett Baer, Tom Cotton, Josh Kraushaar in the next hour of the Salem Radio Network. Let me give you some late-breaking news. Cleveland Cavaliers are 8-0, the only 8-0 team in the NBA. So that is my election day opener for you. Ohio's in a very good mood, and tonight with Senator-elect Bernie Moreno, I'll be in an even better mood. Much is going to happen today, much. And we will begin covering it live at 5 p.m. on the Salem News Channel and across the Salem Radio Network. I'm coming in early tomorrow, an hour earlier than normal across your radio dial. So you can listen at hughhewitt.com beginning at 5 a.m. in the East. I do want to play for you because these ads are a little bit older than other ads. The battleground are so full of ads that they've obscured. We don't know what's going to happen. Donald Trump could win a landslide. He could win by a little, and Kamala Harris can win by a little, but you can't win by a landslide. And so all that's possible. We'll know maybe by late tonight. Certainly, I hope by the time I take in the air in the morning. But I don't want to get ahead of my skis. I cannot say other than I'm feeling pretty good about Donald Trump right now, but I felt pretty good about Mitt Romney in 2012, and I felt pretty bad about Donald Trump in 2016. And I was wrong in both cases, and I've stopped trusting my feelings. I'm so skeptical of feelings in an electorate that grows large and larger and larger by day, and the complexity of which understanding it is beyond me. I can tell you about con law. I can teach constitutional law. I can tell you about cases. I can follow facts. But people who are data-driven scientists need to be in the seat tonight. Do not believe a word of the exit polls. They are, as Brad Todd, great pollster, just put out, exit polls are a tool for understanding what happened, not predicting what will happen. And they are often dirty and wrong in both directions. So just do not believe them. The early exits were very misleading in 2016 when I worked for NBC on election night desk. Do not believe them. But I want to give you a sample of a couple of ads from Pennsylvania and Ohio, from the Frontiers of Freedom PAC, that you probably have never seen or heard unless you're really a political addict. But this is the sort of thing. Here's an ad from Ohio hitting Sherrod Brown, cut number 10.
The Little Sisters of the Poor give up their lives to care for the elderly and homeless, but Sherrod Brown joined the Democratic Party's cruel war against them by giving the winning vote to the leader of the 23 attorney generals trying to force the sisters to violate their faith and pay for abortion pills. Sherrod Brown went along with Kamala Harris and Democratic senators who sought to impose an unconstitutional religious test against Catholics to make Catholics give up their faith to become judges or hold office. Sherrod Brown supported the Harris-Biden administration's gender craziness, forcing Catholic schools to destroy women's sports and allow men in women's locker rooms. Brown supported the Harris-Biden administration's attempts to force Catholic doctors, nurses, and hospitals to perform abortions. Brown never protested the Harris-Biden use of SWAT team tactics and jailing of peacefully protesting pro-life activists. Brown also refused to speak out against the Harris-Biden use of the FBI to target traditional Catholics as potential terrorist threats, and he won't criticize the FBI director for his false testimony. Brown is a pro-abortion extremist, supporting unrestricted up-to-the-moment-of-birth abortions paid for by taxpayers, and even voted against legislation that would protect newborn abortion survivors. He even refused to speak out against a Democratic governor justifying the killing of children who survive abortions. Sherrod Brown stayed silent even as the Harris-Biden White House mocked Catholics and all Christians by replacing the traditional Easter Sunday proclamation with the offensive Transgender Day of Visibility. He never went on the record about the Harris-Biden administration's initial refusal to allow the Knights of Columbus to celebrate a Catholic Mass on Memorial Day, a clear act of religious bigotry and an assault on all veterans. Latino American families remember, Latino Americans remember, how evil governments in Mexico, Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela hated the church and Catholics, and how they persecuted priests, nuns, and laypeople. Latino Americans know from history that this must not happen here in America. Ask Sherrod Brown why he has supported so many bigoted anti-Catholic measures. Ask Sherrod Brown why he won't speak out against the anti-Catholic bigotry in the Democratic Party.
Viva Cristo Rey! Viva la Virgen de Guadalupe!
Frontiers of Freedom Action is responsible for the content of this ad.
All right, now that is an independent expenditure committee ad, and it's hard as nails on Sherrod Brown. Doesn't mention Bernie Moreno is a great practicing Catholic, and that it's a targeted ad that you will have never seen right? If you're not a Catholic living in Ohio, you probably will not have seen that ad. Let me play a similar ad from the same committee on behalf of, or attacking Bob Casey, Pennsylvania's incumbent senator. Doesn't mention Dave McCormick. Again, independent expenditure ad aimed at Catholics in Pennsylvania. Cut number 11.
The Little Sisters of the Poor give up their lives to care for the elderly and homeless. But Bob Casey joined the Democratic Party's cruel war against them by giving the winning vote to the leader of the 23 attorney generals trying to force the sisters to violate their faith and pay for abortion pills. Bob Casey went along with Kamala Harris and Democratic senators who sought to impose an unconstitutional religious test against Catholics to make Catholics give up their faith to become judges or hold office. Bob Casey supported the Harris-Biden administration's gender craziness, forcing Catholic schools to destroy women's sports and allow men in women's locker rooms. Casey supported the Harris-Biden administration's attempts to force Catholic doctors, nurses, and hospitals to perform abortions. Casey never protested the Harris-Biden use of SWAT team tactics and jailing of peacefully protesting pro-life activists. Casey also refused to speak out against the Harris-Biden use of the FBI to target traditional Catholics as potential terrorist threats, and he won't criticize the FBI director for his false testimony. Casey is a pro-abortion extremist, supporting unrestricted up-to-the-moment-of-birth abortions paid for by taxpayers, and even voted against legislation that would protect newborn abortion survivors. He even refused to speak out against a Democratic governor justifying the killing of children who survive abortions. Bob Casey stayed silent even as the Harris-Biden White House mocked Catholics and all Christians by replacing the traditional Easter Sunday proclamation with the offensive Transgender Day of Visibility. He never went on the record about the Harris-Biden administration's initial refusal to allow the Knights of Columbus to celebrate a Catholic Mass on Memorial Day, a clear act of religious bigotry and an assault on all veterans. Latino American families remember, Latino Americans remember, how evil governments in Mexico, Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela hated the church and Catholics, and how they persecuted priests, nuns, and laypeople. Latino Americans know from history that this must not happen here in America. Ask Bob Casey why he has supported so many bigoted anti-Catholic measures. Ask Bob Casey why he won't speak out against the anti-Catholic bigotry in the Democratic Party.
Viva Cristo Rey, viva la Virgen de Guadalupe.
Frontiers of Freedom Action is responsible for the content of this.
You see, there's so much to this election you don't know about, and I don't know about. I only know about these ads because I happened to run into my old friend, Tony Dolan, who worked in the Reagan White House along with me, and we are both practicing Catholics, and during the Octave of All Souls, we go to Mass on each day. I don't know, Tony might be a daily Mass attender, probably a better Catholic than I am, but during the Octave of All Souls, it's important for Catholics to receive communion every day and visit a cemetery and seek the plenary indulgence for a departed soul. And they can name him, and they can always say, for the lost, most forgotten soul in purgatory. It's Catholic theology, not Protestant theology. But the point is, Catholics know it, and Catholics get that ad, and you don't know anything about that, how Catholics are going to vote in Ohio. And I cannot wait, because I do believe that the Catholic vote is what's driving the Latino shift towards Donald Trump and people like Dave McCormick in Pennsylvania, Bernie Moreno in Ohio. And yes, Wisconsin's Lutheran, right? It's primarily a Lutheran place. Evangelical Michigan. There are people voting for Mike Rogers in Michigan, Eric Hovde in Wisconsin, because they want the Senate in the hands of people who are anti-Catholic. There are a lot of Catholics in Arizona that want Carrie Lake to win because they just know. I can't remember her opponent is Ruben Gallegos. Most radical guys I've ever seen run for the Senate and have a chance. He's just a hard leftist and honored veteran. Thank you for your service. I'm not going to vote for someone that far to the left. I just will never do that. Nella Domenici in New Mexico. Again, there are trends that no one covers. What are the Catholics doing? Do you see that poll? Because I am so amazed by how many people go to Mass, and it is probably the source of greatest encouragement for me when Holy Day of Obligation, like last Friday, I had a blowout Friday morning, and I was not in a good place, but I went and heard the best sermon I'd heard in a long time. And the Mass was Friday at noon, and it was completely jammed in downtown Alexandria, Virginia at the Basilica of St. Mary's. And I thought, this country's okay. As long as religious freedom is okay, the free exercise of religion. And then I heard my Presbyterian pastor, I'm an evangelical Roman Catholic Presbyterian, so I go to Mass on Saturday or early Sunday, and I go to Presbyterian services with my wife, who's a cradle Presbyterian. And our Presbyterian pastor gave great sermon and teaching on said, this country's fine, provided the Constitution remains strong, and I think it will. and people get out and vote. So please you can register, even if you've never voted before in states like Michigan and Wisconsin, you've never voted before. But if you're in the right kind of state, including Virginia and Maryland and Michigan and Wisconsin and North Carolina and New Mexico and Nevada, you can go today, take proof of your residence, take proof, driver's license will work, or an electric bill, or even take a pharmacy. If you've got, it works with TSA. If you've got a medication, you can show this is my ID. If no one doesn't want to let you vote, if someone tries to stop you from voting, stay in line. And if someone says you're not eligible, say, I want to file a provisional. Do your duty as a citizen, but only citizens, because they're going to prosecute non-citizens this year who vote. Citizens, vote today. Senator Rubio was in Raleigh, North Carolina yesterday, and I just liked what he had to say. I want you to hear it. Cut number 9.
We took, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Wow. Unfortunately, our country took a wrong turn 4 years ago, and now we're stuck in a malaise. Everything is bad news. Our border is broken. We're not respected in the world. Hardworking men and women have been forgotten and left behind. Our allies don't trust us, and our enemies don't fear us. We are tired of living in a country that is no longer dreaming big, but that is going to change tomorrow, and you're going to help change it. Tomorrow, North Carolina and the country are going to make our 45th president our 47th president. And with Donald Trump back in the White House, together we will dream big again for this country. We will be a country that once again is proud of its history, excited about its future, because together with Donald Trump, we are going to make America not just great, but greater than it has ever been before. Thanks.
I love that message. I just love that message. And that's why I voted for Donald Trump. We cannot afford the risk that Kamala Harris poses. She just doesn't have the minimum qualifications to lead our men and women in uniform in danger right now. Her administration will be packed with the far left. Her judges will be whacked. I just whack jobs. I just think that we cannot run that risk. If you are a young person and you are despairing of the future, it doesn't have to be that way. It was that way in 1980, and I was coming out of law school, and just starting law school, and the country woke up and Ronald Reagan had won in a landslide. And the Senate had switched, and no one saw it coming because people in the last minute said, we can't do 4 more years of this. The vice president doesn't have the qualifications to be president. She was selected, didn't win 1 vote. She never made it to the starting line. She didn't do 1 serious interview except with Brett Baer, and she couldn't finish it. And right now, you don't think you're going to buy a house, but you're going to be able to buy a house if Donald Trump wins. So pleased to welcome back Senator Tom Cotton of the great state of Arkansas, member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, the Senate Intel Committee. Good morning, Senator Cotton. You have been working your rear end off. Where are you today?
Well, Hugh, yeah, I've been out on the trail 8 states in the last 7 days. All of our critical Senate races from Montana to Nebraska to Texas, the Great Lakes states. We got a lot of enthusiastic voters out there, a lot of incredible energy. I feel pretty good about how we're going to do, not just in the Senate tonight, but also for President Trump as well.
I feel pretty good as well, but I'm not going to get over my skis. What I want to ask you first, Senator Cotton, because I've seen you a lot with Dave McCormick. He's, of course, West Point and Army. He's 82nd Airborne, you're 101st Airborne. I want to know, I think he's run a flawless campaign. I mean, maybe the equal of any Senate campaign I've ever seen. How did you feel about that particular campaign in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, Dave has run a great campaign. I was with him and former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, our friend, and Bill Hagerty in Reading yesterday with President Trump. You know, that's kind of the life of a Senate candidate in a swing state. We were supposed to be in one part of the state doing a rally for Dave, and then 3 days ago, President announced he'd be in Reading and Pittsburgh, so that's where everyone went instead. But it was a great setting. Dave did a great job on his closing message in Pennsylvania that Bob Casey has been a do-nothing senator, which is kind of charitable to him. He's actually been doing a lot, which is voting with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris 100% of the time. But you got to have a great candidate to win in a swing state like Pennsylvania, and Dave has been great. He's been super hardworking, as you would expect from an Army Ranger and paratrooper, and I'm very confident that Dave is going to win tonight, and he'll be a great U.S. Senator.
Now, Senator Cotton, I posted over at X. Next up, Senator Tom Cotton on national security, our military preparedness, and why we need former President Trump to be President-elect Trump again. Vote like your life. The lives of our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines depend upon it, because it does. You have been very serious about this. I do not know our soldier's name who died as a result of the catastrophic decision to try and make a gesture about the pier in Gaza. He died yesterday. I don't have his name in front of me. But would you expand on this? Because it's a commander-in-chief election, in my view. There's such a difference between Trump and Harris on the most important job of the president, which is to be commander-in-chief of our military.
Yeah, Hugh. So, I mean, being a credible and strong commander-in-chief is a necessary threshold that any presidential candidate has to cross. Foreign policy is not the highest or the final thing that most Americans vote on, but if you're not serious commander-in-chief, especially in a growingly dangerous world, I think many Americans simply can't take you seriously as president. We know that Donald Trump was a strong commander-in-chief. For 4 years, we rebuilt our military, and we had no new wars starting anywhere. In fact, we ended wars, ISIS. But Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have just been a disaster. On their watch, our military has declined. We have a major war in Europe, major war in the Middle East, and now we have an American soldier who was deceased because he was working on a stupid political vanity project. This pier that they wanted to build to send aid to Gaza, which we certainly have no responsibility to do. We didn't send aid to Germany or Japan in World War II. And it was known that it wouldn't work in the waters of the Mediterranean. They did it to placate the anti-Semitic wing of the Democratic Party. It almost immediately started to fall apart. Soldiers were injured, and one of the soldiers who were injured over the summer just passed away of those wounds. That's add another American who's dead because of the incompetence of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. We can't afford 4 years of Kamala Harris being our commander-in-chief.
I also fear, Senator, and I don't want to be alarmist, but that we'll turn her out. If Harris wins tonight, she'll be turned out in 4 years because she lacks the minimum qualifications to lead, and it will become painfully obvious, and she won't be able to avoid interviews. But the advantage that goes to the Chinese Communist Party and Xi Jinping in that period of time would be extraordinarily difficult to catch up. Not impossible, very hard to catch up. You agree with my assessment?
I do. I mean, Kamala Harris is overmatched by events here. I mean, normally presidential candidates get to this point because they work through the 18-month slog of their own party. Donald Trump earned the nomination in 2016. Barack Obama, whatever you think of his politics, earned his nomination in 2008 against Hillary Clinton. Kamala Harris had this gifted to her. She can't even sit down with the women who run The View. How is she going to sit down with Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin and protect this country's interests?
Not possible. Now, I want to tell people about another late-breaking story. The big story is headlines this morning. Joe Rogan endorsed Donald Trump. Megyn Kelly endorsed Donald Trump. And I'm going to come to Peanut the squirrel with you in a moment. But this is a very serious story. And you're on Intel, but I know you haven't had a briefing on this, and you wouldn't tell us about it anyway. Ellis Items brought this to my attention this morning. Western security officials say they believe that 2 incendiary devices shipped via DHL were part of a covert Russian operation that ultimately aimed to start fires aboard cargo or passenger aircraft flying to the U.S. and Canada as Moscow steps up a sabotage campaign against Washington and its allies. The devices ignited at DHL logistics hubs in July, one in Leipzig, Germany, and another in Birmingham, England. I'm just astonished that no one is paying attention to what's going on in the world in this campaign, Senator. I know you try, but it's not. People are worried about inflation. They're worried about the border, but we've got real national security problems.
Yeah, Hugh, that's right. As I said, for many Americans, being a credible commander-in-chief is a threshold question. If you can't get past that, they're not going to consider you on anything else. Those are the table stakes. It was certainly like that, if you recall, during the Cold War. After the disaster the Democratic Party's inflicted on America in the Vietnam War, Republicans won every single election, save one after Watergate, for the next 6 elections. And they only went back to the White House in 1992 because our chief enemy, the Soviet Union, had disintegrated. The American people just stopped trusting Democrats with foreign policy and national security after Vietnam until the Soviet Union literally ceased to exist. Now, we had what some people call a holiday history in which foreign policy and national security receded, But I think most Americans realize that the world is very dangerous, growing more so every day, in part because of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's incompetence, and that the commander-in-chief question really is the table stakes, that you've got to be a credible commander-in-chief to protect this country before voters start to entertain your views on things like how to control inflation, how to control our border, how to get the deficit under control and things like that. And again, Kamala Harris is not a serious or credible commander-in-chief.
Now, Senator, I want to close by talking about a very silly thing, but not silly. I was furious on Friday, and I'm not talking about quitting the Post. I'm talking about the folks, 12 officials of the New York State government and county government went to the Longo home and seized Peanut the squirrel and Fred the raccoon and euthanized them. 12 people with a search warrant from a government so bloated that they can't do anything about our borders, but they can send 12 people to kill a squirrel. And I think it sort of encapsulates my frustration with this massive, sprawling, ineffective, wasteful government. Did you expect that to be part of the closing news cycle?
No, Hugh, I can't say I did. I opened up social media on Saturday morning looking for some baseball news about qualifying offers to free agent and opt-ins and opt-outs on contracts. And I couldn't find anything because everything was about Peanut the squirrel. I was not aware of Peanut before this, but I do agree that it's a perfect symbol of an overreaching government that disrespects the rights of its citizens. I don't know all the circumstances in New York, but even if there was some technical violation of having a wild animal as a pet or something, don't you think Animal Services or whatever agency there is in New York could have given this guy a call, could have knocked on his door and said, we need to help you get right with the law so you can keep your pets? Is it really that hard to do? Or do you have to go in guns drawn over a squirrel? This is kind of government overreach, the kind of demanding, bossy, obtrusive bureaucracy that the American people are sick of.
And this brings me to my final point with you, Senator. A president brings with him or her 3,000 to 5,000 appointees, and they appoint between 100 and 300 judges for lifetime tenure. The 3,000 that Kamala Harris would include would be whoever ordered Peanut. I mean, they're just waiting to move up from the New York State bureaucracy to the federal bureaucracy. Do you think a Republican Senate is going to be there if she's the president to check her and just say no, or affirm Donald Trump's choices early and get him going quickly?
Well, first off, Hugh, you're exactly right. It's not the kind of people that ordered the raid on Peanut. It's literally those people. That's an audition to come be an enforcer for Kamala Harris's EPA or her IRS, just like Lois Lerner was specifically chosen because the Obama administration knew that she would target conservatives. So you're right about that. It's the actual people who ordered the raid on Peanut, as well as all those kinds of people. I'm confident the Republicans are going to win a Senate majority tonight. I think probably a healthy Senate majority, so we can confirm President Trump's cabinet selections promptly. I do not think Kamala Harris is going to win. If she did, though, I think it would be a very high bar for her to get any of these radical nominees through. But I'm confident that not only are we going to win a healthy majority, but Donald Trump will be back to the White House.
Senator Cotton, always good to talk to you. Thank you, Senator. Get some rest. I know you have been working. I've been following your X account. It's a remarkable effort that you poured in, and I appreciate it. Thank you, Senator. You've been out there with Tim Sheehy in Montana, with Jim Justice in West Virginia. They're going to win. That's why the Republicans are going to have at least 51. But Dave McCormick, as I said, I think he's run a perfect campaign against a very flawed incumbent who's been there way too long and doing nothing. And so I think Dave McCormick's going to win Pennsylvania. I feel very good about Bernie Moreno winning in Ohio. I was with Bernie 2 weeks ago with Mike Gallagher and in Columbus, and I'm just impressed. He's got such sparkle. I got to meet Mrs. Moreno for the first time. Bernie Moreno's been everywhere. He is the epitome of the Johnny Cash, I've been everywhere man. And he's a naturalized United States citizen who made it big in the United States. Now he wants to give back. I think Mike Rogers is going to win in Michigan because it's a serious election. And a serious election calls for a serious man who's not only a veteran, but an FBI agent and former head of the House Intel Committee, Mike Rogers. I think Eric Hovde, who I never heard of until this year. He's just blown me away every time he's been on this show. And you can go and vote today in Michigan and Wisconsin and Virginia. I got good hopes for Larry Hogan if Maryland has a memory. I think Kerry Lake's going to pull this out in Arizona. I think it's possible Nella Domenici pulls this out in New Mexico. And I would not fall over in a faint if Hung Kao won in Virginia. But I also think Sam Brown in Nevada deserves your vote. Nevada, if you're listening to me, I'm on live right now in Nevada. If anyone ever deserved a vote, it is Sam Brown. He gave up a lot of his life, West Point, going into the war, being grievously injured, recovering, setting an example that inspires. Get out and vote. Nevada, you can do same-day registration and voting. If you are indeed a citizen, do not vote if you're not a citizen. You will go to jail if they catch you, and you should. It's for Americans to elect American leaders. I'll be back tonight on the Salem News Channel in the 6 p.m. hour, but coverage begins at 5 p.m. on the Salem News Channel. I'll be back an hour early tomorrow morning to tell you what we know and don't know. I'm joined by Josh Kraushaar now. He is editor-in-chief of Jewish Insider. Josh, the late-breaking stories keep coming. The late Bernie Marcus passed away this morning. Rest in peace. But Ross Douthat, maybe one of the most level-headed people in the United States of America, posted his expectation. What I've been expecting since the spring, no reason to hedge now. Republican Electoral College victory for Donald Trump of 312. And he explains his reasons at X. What do you expect, Josh?
Well, Hugh, Ross's map pushes the blue wall states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, into the Trump column. Trump won those three states in 2016. It was the only time that a Republican won any of those three states going all the way back to 1992. So if Trump wins, you're going to see sort of those Midwestern blue-collar voters once again tilting Republican, voting Trump, and that would give the outcome that Ross projects. Look, I've been talking to strategists and pollsters in all those three states. This race is functionally tied in all three. I would give maybe Harris the slightest of advantages in Michigan, whereas Wisconsin and Pennsylvania are jump balls. That's why you had Trump and Harris in Pennsylvania in the closing rally for the Harris campaign in Philadelphia. But look, I think the big question of this election, Hugh, the big fundamental factors is what matters more? Is it the inroads that Trump has made with working class voters of all backgrounds, of black, of young men, Gen Z voters as well, or is the suburban showing for Harris, the women, the gender gap, and female voters seemingly tilting and moving Harris's way? Is that going to matter more? We are two Americas. I mean, that's not an exaggeration. Where depending on sort of your college, your level of education, your gender, that really determines a lot about how people are voting in these final days.
I want to ask you about supporters of Israel, Josh. Another headline this morning: Prime Minister Netanyahu is offering millions of dollars safe passage for Gazans who release hostages. I have been following Israel so closely since 10/7. I'm not Jewish. I'm a strong supporter of the state of Israel, as you obviously are. But I think the Jewish vote is bound to increase for President Trump because I think they perceive in Kamala Harris, if not an adversary, maybe the least friendly American president we've ever had. Is that current in your community?
Well, look, I will say, as far as the polling and the politics go, there is evidence that there's incremental slippage among what I would call like the moderate minded Jewish voters who are dissatisfied that the Biden administration and Vice President Harris on the campaign trail hasn't been more outspoken in support for Israel. I think generally in the community there is a sense of gratitude that the policy has generally been directionally supportive of Israel, even if there have been some serious disagreements. But the rhetoric has been very, very equivocal, especially from Harris. And also, there's been as you know, Hugh, we've talked about this. There's been an outbreak of anti-Semitism on campuses, and you haven't heard that loud and clear as much as I think a lot of Jewish leaders would like from this administration and from Vice President Harris herself. The poll, there was a forward poll, a good poll that came out last week, showed Harris only winning 62% of the Jewish vote. According to the exits, Biden won about 70% in 2020. Trump went up from 30 to 31. So it's not like Trump is becoming a big beneficiary, but there are a lot of, I think, Jewish voters that are either undecided or having trouble casting that ballot for Democrats and for Harris because of not being as outspoken as they would expect when it comes to anti-Semitism and support for Israel.
Well, I will be watching the collar counties in Philadelphia, which have a large Jewish American population. The same is true in Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh. We'll be seeing. Josh, I'm just curious. How do you spend today? We got a minute.
Well, I am looking at a lot of the baseline. I'm a big junkie, and I like to look at data and kind of compare past elections to what we're looking for today. I'm going to be on Fox News Radio tonight, being the color analyst for the broadcast. But I'm looking at a lot of the data and looking at some key counties. You mentioned the suburban collar counties in Philadelphia, Hugh. That's a big area I'm closely watching. The WOW counties around Milwaukee. I mean, I'm looking at these Republican-leaning suburban areas that have tilted Democrat. Harris is going to need to, I think, do quite well to win this election in areas like the suburban Milwaukee, suburban Philadelphia, suburban Detroit. So those are key areas, and I'm just going to be pouring over a lot of the numbers, both historical and as the data comes in, looking at how it changes from the past elections.
I'll be following your X account today, Josh, closely. Josh Kroshauer, one of the best. Go follow him on X. Thank you, Josh. Remember, if you need to fill some time during the day, Dwayne's World drops an emergency podcast today, which will collect all of Dwayne's data analysis. He was up early this morning doing it to put all the data in one place. We won't know anything, America, until at earliest 9 p.m. tonight, Eastern. I mean, that's way early. That would be blowout margins in Pennsylvania and Georgia and North Carolina for Trump. That would seal it. That's about the only thing I can tell you. Buckle up, get some sleep, get some exercise. Do go out and vote. Please send my YouTube channel opening monologue around to people who you want to move to get up and vote and exercise their franchise, do their duty as a citizen. Thank you, Harley. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Generalissimo. I'll be back on the Salem News Channel in the 6 p.m. hour tonight, and I'll be out an hour earlier tomorrow to make sure you get the facts, not any kind of opinion, just the facts. Election night coverage starts at 5 p.m. on the Salem News Channel.